Video game remakes, they're very hit or miss. There's a whole spectrum of them, really. You got your re-releases that aren't remakes, but are instead just remasters with a fresh coat of paint. Think something like GTA Definitive Edition. Well, I don't know if I'd call it a fresh coat of paint. Then you have remakes that are only a remake by definition, and basically are just tile-for-tile recreations without any creative liberties, and it may as well just be a port. Then sometimes you get remakes that are kind of just new games. Think Final Fantasy VII, which is split into 3 games for some reason. Yep, I can't think of a single reason. The thing is, video game remakes should be a good thing. While a lot of the time these days a remake can solely be made as a cash grab, there's quite a bit of remakes that can be used to legitimately make a product a better experience than its original release. Think about Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. These games are the definitive way to play Gold and Silver, giving the Game Boy Color titles fantastic new sprite work, a ton of content, and almost everything that made Pokemon good up to that point. Getting back to 2022, that is a lot of twos. When Pac Man World Re-Pac, a remake of Pac Man World, was announced in a Nintendo Direct partner showcase over the same summer, I think a lot of Pac Man fans, hardcore and casual, were genuinely excited for a few reasons. Not only could a new HD title on modern platforms be a great way to make the game a better experience, it was also nice that Namco just kind of made a, sort of new Pac Man game instead of, a trillionth way to play the arcade title. Like, look, I love Pac-Man, don't get me wrong, but not this much. There's too much. There's too much Pac-Man, okay? Chill.
As for me, I already reviewed Pac Man World 2 and World 3, and my opinion on the second game would lead to a lot of angry people on Twitter. The fact that they're using a smash render us the most insulting thing about this wild thumbnail, it really tells you everything you need to know about this person. What the fuck?
You know what, though? That's my bad for expecting anything less. It's Twitter. But yeah, it's time to review the first game in the Pac Man World franchise. I took the announcement of Re-Pac as an opportunity to catch up with the series, but before we review Re-Pac, I think it's only fair we do a deep dive on the original version as well. After all, how can I review a remake without doing a serious look at what it's, well, remaking? And how can Sega not make a Sonic Mania 2 after 5 years? Dumber stuff has happened before, I guess. Let's just play the game. Booting up the game, we immediately see a CGI cutscene in our robust cast of characters who will be supporting us throughout this adventure. We got our dog, Chomp Chomp, who, I'm just gonna say it, is way better of a dog than whenever this abomination in World 2 was. Seriously, that's scary. We got Puka, an obvious callback to the enemies from Dig Dug, which is funny that we're friends with the protagonist's enemy and not him. Maybe Pac-Man and Dig Dug just hate each other or something. There you go, there's some Namco lore. On that note, apparently more Namco characters were meant to make appearances, including Mappy, but for some reason that never really came to fruition. With Puka, we see Baby Pac, who gets taken by an anchor. Wait a minute, so does Puka. If I didn't know better, there's probably some giant threat to Pac Island looming, and everyone's disappearances could be traced back to a singular cause.
Don't spoil it.
The other side clicks, which includes Pac Professor, Pac Jr., and Miss Pac-Man, are abducted too. Pac-Man comes home after a long day at the old 9 to 5 of eating, I guess, ready to party for his 20th anniversary, only to realize everyone's gone and the party is ransacked.
And it should be noted the theme of the party isn't just there for decoration, as this game was meant to celebrate Pac-Man's 20th anniversary.
If you take out a magnifying glass, you'll find that this game is actually not titled Pac Man World, but 20th Anniversary Pac Man World.
Which is a stupid title, no one really calls it that, and if you do call it that, what the hell's wrong with you?
You know, this wasn't always going to be a 20th anniversary game. Pac Man World technically began development as a PlayStation title referred to as Pac Man Ghost Zone. Thanks to PlayStation Museum, we're able to see quite a bit of what existed of the project. The premise of Pac Man Ghost Zone is that a teenager who looks like the most generically rotten kid I've ever seen. Seriously, this poor guy, this almost feels kind of mean how they drew him. Well, he gets sucked into a Pac Man arcade machine after crapping on the game, as he's only playing it because the newest and most popular arcade game is busy.
Which is a pretty interesting commentary on Pac-Man as a whole, if they intended for this to be a parallel, because, well, what was happening around the time were 3D platformers such as Mario 64. If this was intended, I actually think the story is kind of genius commentary, as this takes Pac-Man into 3D.
Going with this theme of relevance in an evolving industry, well, this game was intended to be something the likes of Mario 64. And just a heads up, we're going to be referencing Mario 64 a lot in this video. There's quite a few inspirations. Except in this demo, they forgot the best parts like the 360 movement and the camera controls in favor of tank controls. Did you guys not understand the point of the goddamn game? From the footage we've seen, I think the environments are kind of hit or miss. We have a temple type of level, which I really liked, as well as some sort of computer chip level. Then you get some sections that were like kind of ugly and generic, but hey, it's a demo. It's not super fair of me to really critique that. It's kind of funny because Sega around this time was also struggling to adapt their mascot to the third dimension, and just like Sonic X-treme, which is the game they were trying to make, Pac Man Ghost Zone would not come to fruition as the result of a very troubled development. A subsidiary of Namco Home Tech, were responsible for making this game, even though they really didn't want to do a Pac Man game apparently. But hey, credit to them, they really did try, and what we got was this demo. And then they got yelled at when they showed it off, and no, that's not one of my usual like exaggeration jokes. This was apparently literally so bad that the president of Namco, Masaya Nakamura, screamed at the team and left the room. God, I would have loved to be a ghost on the wall in that meeting. But yeah, development never really got to a healthy point, since shortly after that, Namco would cut both the funding and development time of this game, and unsurprisingly, it would get canceled. Well, I guess not really canceled, but it kind of just like restarted development with some assets more or less, and what came of it would just be Pac Man World. Also, apparently this demo's early documents called Blinky Clyde, so I guess in a way, this whole trilogy f***ed this up. Congratulations, Namco, you messed this up 3 times in a row! Yeah, I know it's a beta product, but I had to mention it. It's a funny bit, just go with it. Pac Man World would ultimately release October 15th, 1999 in North America and other regions shortly after. It was mostly a PlayStation 1 release, but there was technically another platform it released on. Now this is mostly lost media, but apparently there was also a PC release of Pac Man World 1, but it was exclusive to South Korea. There's no gameplay of it, and I can only find a few photos of the box, but that's pretty cool it exists, so I had to mention it, and I do hope it leaks one day. Back to the game and back to Pac Island, Pac-Man gets an invitation to a party which says he can meet Pac-Man. But wait, Pac-Man surely can't be there because look, he's standing right there. What's going on? Well, the Pac-Man in question is a recreation referred to as Talkman, a robot made by a ghost named Orson. The other ghosts spot Pac-Man kayaking to the island, and they find that they captured the wrong Pac-Man, as they thought Miss Pac-Man was Pac-Man. Talkman orders everyone to capture Pac-Man before he makes it to the mansion, and bam, we have our premise for a video game. I said Pac-Man 9 times in that single paragraph. I just thought you should know that. I really do like the cutscenes though, they're really charming. There's even some voice acting from the ghosts, which you might fear could be a literal disaster. Like if you look at games like Mario Sunshine or even some of the Sonic games, voice acting wasn't always done well. Mario! But no, these voices are really well performed. I gotta give full credit, I didn't cringe a single time. Yep, put that on the box. Also, something kind of interesting is apparently Pac-Man was originally supposed to have a voice actor, but the team couldn't decide how he should sound. I guess they needed another 6 years to decide. He does have a pretty funny scream though. Alright, yeah, story, history, development, blah blah, let's play the game. Buccaneer Beach takes us to a tutorial level. There are a lot of these hint signs that teach us his movement and how the game overall will function. It's a decent enough tutorial, having the player learn mostly by executing the instructions themselves rather than anything long or drawn out, and I think it doesn't overstay its welcome. Control-wise, I think Pac-Man feels pretty good to play as, actually. Now we gotta remember, the year is 1999. It was a time when people thought the world was gonna end and sh**ers like me were born. I'm surprised people had the will to do anything back then. Point being, the movement is a bit antiquated. Keep in mind that the analog stick isn't really a thing there. I think you can technically use it, but you only have 8 directions, so it's really not optimized for what would be considered 3-dimensional movement by today's standards. So in my playthrough, I used the PlayStation D-pad. The directional buttons. The D-pad, which you might think would be miserable for a 3D game, but you get used to it. I think it works because most of the world is geometric and grid-like. It's not like Super Mario 64 or Ocarina of Time, where you have hills and open environments, and the levels are quite limited in scope here. Pac-Man gets a butt bounce here. If you press X in repetition, you do a slam, and it's really fun. You get a higher jump by using it, and it's an effective way to take out enemies. You can even use it in repetition to climb up hills. Sometimes you'll have to chain together bouncy pad bounces, but the timing is pretty difficult. Oftentimes I would just roll off of them, but in general, it's really fun and satisfying to use. Also in Pac-Man's arsenal is the Rev Roll, which, you know, it's cool. You use it to move platforms and stuff, but my question is, why does it sound like an elephant? You You can also just attack enemies with the rev roll, and it's just faster to move around with too. Pac Man also has a move where he can throw Pac dots, which I'm kind of mixed on. I like the idea of picking up Pac dots and having it actually mean something later world games never really recaptured, but also the throw is very situational. There are enemies where it makes sense to use them. Sometimes there's little guys with fires or spikes on their heads, but it's really not that interesting of a move. It could have been more cool if some buttons or platforms could be activated by throwing these specifically, or maybe integrate some sort of puzzle. I don't know. It just feels kind of tacked on. Like, what is this accomplishing that the other moves, can't? You can also charge it for a few seconds if you want a better throw. That's completely useless. I don't know when you would use that, to be honest, but it exists. Pac-Man can also ledge grab, which feels very good and satisfying. It's not always accurate, which we'll get into in a bit, but I'm surprised how many risky leaps of faith I can make and still grab onto a platform with. There are two power-ups in this game. One is known as the Chrome Pellet. I have definitely seen this somewhere before. Yep, you guys wanted to be like Mario 64, I get it, but you can be a little less obvious, whereas the Nintendo ninjas when you actually need them. You even use it for some similar puzzles, as one of the functions is literally letting you walk at the bottom of a body of water. The funny thing about this is, while this is a ripoff, I actually like the addition. I maybe even would go so far as to say I think it works better in this gameplay style than it did for Mario 64. Yeah, I went there, plus ratio, plus L, plus I'm just trying to sound hip, just ignore me. It also makes you invincible to enemies, and sometimes you'll just be given one so you can breeze through a given section, so it does give Pac-Man quite a bit of decent usage, which I can't say for the other power-up, the Shockwave Pellet, which nets you a grand total of 1 overpowered bounce. That's it, it's gone. What's the point of that? I want to bounce more. And I feel gross saying this. In fact, I think I just got a rash, but I wish it did what Pac Man World 3 did, giving you many ground pounds in a specific amount of time. As is, the Shockwave Pellet in World 1 is pretty useless, and I think I could count on my hand the number of times it even shows up in this game. I guess there's technically a third power-up, being the Power Pellet, but come on, it's like considering Mario's jump a special move. That's what Pac-Man does, he eats. Basically, there will be sections with ghosts, you get one, and you can eat the ghosts. God, that jump is just so damn satisfying. You can't beat that level of satisfaction. Unfortunately, there's really no requirement to eat the ghosts. They're pretty much purely there for score. Well, I think the movement itself is fine. I think one of the biggest problems with this game is that the depth perception is completely screwed. Often, you can totally underestimate a given jump, leading to your death. The absolute worst of these is the third Funhouse level, Spin Dizzy, which pissed me off more than I can even put into words. I think I would need 2 languages. This level is filled with these platforms that spin around in circles. Now, as much as I praised the D-pad controls earlier, here I have no other choice but to say the lack of precision is a serious problem. I died so many times in this level, but the issue is I never really felt like it was my fault and it would lead to game overs. I think it's one of the worst crimes a game of this genre can commit. I don't mind challenge, but when the difficulty comes from a flaw in the game, this being bad depth perception of course, it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I don't know how they could have remedied this. It sort of just comes with the style and design they wanted for this game, but I think it has me concluding that these little spinny platforms were just not a good idea with this engine. Another issue comes when you're in the water, and yeah, this game does have quite a bit of swimming sections. They're fine, but these sharks, if you think you can sneak past them, well, guess what? Yeah, you're wrong. They'll get you like a loan shark. Well, since this game is both naturally and artificially challenging, I think it's important we talk about what the life system this game has. It's definitely not the worst I've seen. It's somewhere between the middle of a classic game that completely screwed you and ended your whole game if you died, and modern games which basically had no lives. Alright, let me explain this system. You start with 2 lives. Well, okay, it's 3. It's one of those games that has a counter of 0 when you really have 1 life left. It's 3 lives. It's an understandable system. I get why they do it, but it wouldn't surprise me if this confused millions of kids learning math, because I know as a kid it did for me. So you got your 2, 3, whatever you want to call it lives. You die again, and then you die again, and well, you game over. The only immediate punishment is you lose all of your checkpoints in any level you were currently in. That's fair enough and how a lot of games function these days. You at least get to save in between each level. Well, the only problem with this is, let's say you beat a level with 0 lives remaining because this game is hard as balls. Uh-oh, you save, and next level you still have 0 lives. Yep, you're gonna have to do it alone, and do the level in 1 try. And you know what? Good luck beating a level with 0 lives on your first run through of the game. That's all I can say on that subject. This can put you in a perpetual loop where you've backed yourself into a corner of 0 lives, die once, game over, until you can get more. So oftentimes what this would force me to do was stop progressing. I would go back to World 1, the easy levels, so I could grind some lives. There are usually lives in every level, but on a hard level, the first first time through, well, I didn't really trust myself to make it that far, especially if I had to check every nook and cranny. I don't think the developers intended for you to have to life grind, but it does feel like padding regardless. Basically, all I really would have wanted out of this system is to have the life counter reset if you game over it, and not just keep your lives at 0 if you saved, because it essentially can just lock you into an awkward position. Because I feel like facing any given level with 3 lives is just a lot more fair and doable than expecting the player to do a perfect run through. Besides that, yeah, I think the life system actually works. It's definitely not the worst that I've seen from a game of this style, let me tell you. Because if there's anything I hate out of retro games, it's making progress in a game that you like, only for you to die, and oop, you have to redo everything all over! To be fair to the game, there are points you can genuinely build a good chunk of lives from. As mentioned, there are lives throughout the levels, but more importantly, there are slot machine opportunities at the end of each level, where if you collect 3 fruits of the same kind while playing, you get 1 roll on the slot machine.
What I like about the slot machine is it's not random, it's genuinely about a test of skill. You're supposed to time it the best you can, and this got really addicting to me.
I don't know how there were games like this in that era that weren't striked by the ESRB for simulated gambling. This probably led to someone being addicted. Let's just be honest here, alright? It's all cards on the table. Someone's life was ruined because of Pac Man World. You can also get more fruits by grabbing the letters that spell Pac-Man throughout the game. If you do, you get taken to a bonus minigame, and to be honest, these were all kinda easy, meaning getting even more fruits is all but plausible. I got really into this. I found myself using slight visual cues to line up 3 fruits. The only one I got really good at was lining up cherries, which to be fair was the easiest one. I get it, don't be mean to me. If you really wanted to though, you could legitimately line up even the hardest of fruits, which I think is the Galaxian, which is apparently a fruit, and that nets you 3 lives. So in general, this game does provide you enough 1-ups, but you do have to work for them. I actually really like this system. At first I was kinda salty about having to redo a lot of levels in life grind, but I think sitting back and taking some time to think on it, I think the system really encourages exploration to find these things to bolster your life count, and the game's levels are just hard enough where you do have to be on your toes. It's never a breeze either, because World 1 is not like World 2 or 3 where the fruits are simply a collectible. In this game, they're basically all for score and helping your lives, and of course the various fruit doors to be able to progress, and this is a much better system in my opinion. There's even rewards like a master key if you obtain a cumulative 1 million points, which unlocks all the fruit doors, basically giving you a new game plus type of mode to mess around with. So yeah, basically I'd say the system is a winner, but for God's sake, I just wish they reset the lives you game over. They were so close to a perfect system. You want to know another slice of stupid though? Well, I'll tell you one. Your health carries over between levels. You don't get any refresh there either. So if you complete a level with 0 health, or God forbid save it something like 0 lives and 0 health, well, you have to get more health and levels. I guess this is an attempt to like be more realistic, but it's like, listen man, I'm a yellow ball who eats fruits and is trying to kill ghosts. Nothing about this game is realistic. It's a big pet peeve of mine in general when games don't do the small things to benefit the player's experience. I've always praised Xenoblade Chronicles for its ability to let you fast forward time. For instance, is it realistic? No, of course not, unless someone found time travel and I didn't realize it, but it makes the experience such a smoother game, removing waiting around and sacrificing a bit of realism to give the player a much better time with the product. Point being, it wouldn't have killed anyone to have your health refresh upon entering a level, as there's nothing worse than starting up a stage with no health and you're just so stressed. In addition to the fruit, there are the Galaxians. If you pick one up, you can unlock a door with it that takes you to a special OG Pac-Man maze. I'm mentioning this right now because here's another problem I had with lives. Your exact lives and health carry into this too, because we're just not allowed to have nice things, I guess. I don't know.
What this meant for me, especially in late game, was that I would often go out of my way to avoid getting the Galaxian mazes. Because let's say you enter one with 3 lives and 3 health and you leave with 1 life and 1 health, that's going to transfer with you into the rest of the levels. So unfortunately, I really liked these levels, but I just couldn't sit down and force myself to play them while I was trying to survive.
It's just another one of those things that feels unnecessary. It's a shame too, because I love the OG style mazes. Graphically, they look great for one thing, and are really creative. There are hazards, and these could be a bit hit or miss in terms of if they actually function well or not, and some of them were sort of out of your control to avoid. But for the most part, I found the mazes pretty rewarding. You can also press a button to give you a full view of the stage. These types of mazes would go on to spawn a full game known as Miss Pac-Man's Maze Madness on the PS1 too, which I heard is good. I might actually review it sometime. Overall, the mazes are fun, so it was a shame that I kind of just had to go out of my way to avoid them during my main playthrough. didn't have to be like that if the game was designed just a little bit better. You want to talk bullshit while we're on this topic? Well, we're going to. Some of the bosses in this game, oh my god. The first worlds, the Windbagger is fine. Whatever, he shoots cannonballs at you, you reflect them, all well and good, a fine enough boss. Then this game is probably the most insane difficulty spike I've ever seen with Anubis Rex, which is the second boss. Anubis Rex has 4 phases. The first 3 I would say are manageable. Not easy, but manageable, and a good test of skills. In fact, if this boss ended at phase 3, I would honestly say it's one of the best parts of the game, because up until then it's a genuine test of skill, which kicks your ass, but is still mostly fair. Essentially, there are 4 reveral panels. You have to charge them all up, and then Anubis Rex opens his hands, revealing a diamond that you have to reveral. One thing that kind of sucks is there's a very short window he actually keeps his hand open, meaning that if you get distracted on the way back to land, well, tough pack pellets, you gotta do it again. All that's fine, but that 4th phase, oh my god, it's actually just unfair. Let's talk about how much garbage the game throws at Pac-Man here. You got this douchebag firing lasers at you throughout the entire phase. There are atomic meatballs coming for you every time you get onto a reveral platform. But keep in mind, you can't always jump to the next, because in between those are more atomic meatballs. Then you have a dark tornado coming after you. Like, do you think that's enough stuff to throw at the player? You would literally need telekinesis to be able to do this without taking damage. To make matters worse, the reveral platforms don't retain their charge. Like, if you start charging one and you have to dodge something, which you will, you still have to charge the reveral from 0 to 100, even if you were at 50% before you jump ship. I don't think it's a fair fight, and it sucks, because I genuinely think that the 3rd phase was the perfect mix between skill and challenge, and then some jerk just laughing his butt off at Namco took things too far. You just took it too far, man. The only help that you get on this fight from the game is that you at least don't have to start from the beginning if you die. It does save your progress between phases, except if you game over, which I did quite a bit. Then the game offers you nothing. Go home. If there's any positive to this fight, there is a cool little intro sequence where you are running from the hand boss from Mario 64. But honestly, with the depth perception and amount of spikes, I got hit by everything, so I didn't enjoy this one as much as I probably should have. Sorry. Still, I appreciate them adding something unique to the level, but also keep in mind here, any damage you take during this section transfers into the actual fight. Anubis Rex is a bastard for being the 2nd world of the game, or 3rd, depending on what stage of grief you're going through, because you see, one interesting thing that this game toys with is that you can do worlds out of order. You still need to beat every level to access Pac Man, but basically, if one level is giving you too much grief, you can go to, say, the space world and start doing the levels there. It's a nice little feature. I think this is kind of an example of them trying to replicate the feel of Mario 64, so it's kind of nice. There's a hub world too, which basically there's nothing to interact with, which sucks, because it's actually kind of fun to explore, and you're always like hoping you'll find some Easter egg or something cool, but there's nothing. I mean, come on, add some like pack pellets or something. The 3rd boss, King Galaxian, is probably one of the cruelest bosses I've ever played in a video game, and for all the wrong reasons. There is a genuine challenge here, sure, but my problem I had with this level is that my hand would genuinely be cramping. It's a 2D shooter style level, an obvious callback to Galaga, which honestly should be a high point of this game. That's an awesome reference, and the scope of this stage is brilliant, even containing a 2D shooter sequence leading you into the big fight. You feel epic, you're marching to something really cool, but nope, they f***ed it up. The issue is, when you shoot, you can't hold down a button, you have to mash. 3 buttons on the PlayStation controller fire bullets, and I found that using only one would just not hurt the boss in time or defeat enemies quick enough, meaning I had to mash multiple. And keep in mind that the boss goes on for like 5 minutes, but because it's so hard, you're gonna have to do it over and over again from that first phase. I actually had to pause my game multiple times in the middle of this fight to let my hand heal. This is honestly unacceptable for any video game. No gameplay should ever be at a point where it causes anyone physical pain to a player. It's the reason why games like Mario Party 1 had lawsuits, for crying out loud. All the developers had to do was have a button that you can hold down and continuously fire. That's it. That's all they had to do. It would have been fine. It feels like that's just one of those moments where I felt like the game was not designed in a friendly way. Like the scope was thought first and the player was thought of second. On top of that though, for some reason my eyes would just get really confused by these star hitboxes. I don't think that's an actual criticism I have with the game. I think the outputs of missile fired at you is challenging but fair. I think my eyes just suck. I want a refund. The rest of the bosses aren't too bad. The Funhouse boss isn't even really a boss. It's called Clown Pre and you have to race a bunch of other ghosts. I don't think this one controls well, mainly due to the awkward control scheme. Once I was able to get past that one turn consistently, it was a pretty easy stage. It's a charming little break in the usual gameplay, and I like it quite a bit. The boss of the factory world, Chrome Keeper, I actually also liked quite a bit. I've seen people online say he's boring, and it's kind of a bit boring. You don't do anything super interesting as the fight progresses. But you know what? I like this boss because it's not Anubis Rex, it's not King Galaxian, it doesn't hurt my hands. You gotta bounce on a bunch of platforms while needing the chrome pellet, since there's little fires on the buttons. But also, you need to avoid these little magnet attractors that are actually kind of hard to avoid, mainly because I kind of forgot they exist until it was too late. The boss is repetitive, but manageable, and something I personally enjoyed. While I might not have a ton of positives to say about all of the bosses in this game, I will say up front, I think the level design otherwise is generally great. I think there's a lot here that the developers took into consideration when it came to teaching the players what they should be doing in a given level. World 1 serves as sort of the training wheels for the rest of the game. After the tutorial, Corsair's Cove gives you our first real level. In this level, there aren't many open pits where you risk death, instead opting for a lot of safer water sections. Then Crazy Cannonade is the real deal, taking that away with lots of open pits to keep you on your toes. What I appreciate about this first world is, like I said, it sets you up for most of the game to follow. It's a decent introduction to what the game will be like, following the preferred show but not tell game design philosophy. You'll learn a lot about these reveral platforms that you have to time to avoid getting hit, something which we will see recurring throughout the game. There's a section where you have to time your jumps here. It's very meticulous but taught in an incredibly efficient way. I really do think there's a lot of subtleties in general in Pac Man World. For example, there's a section in 4.2 Barrel Blast. Yeah, they called it Barrel Blast. No, Nintendo stole from Namco. Alright, who's the one stealing intellectual properties now, huh? You guys, you silly geese. Anyways, you have these giant swirling maze sort of things, a few of which you have to time a reveral to get to. What the developers did here is to ensure you'd be able to time it properly is give distinct colors to the platforms that are in the front, because I think otherwise it would have been really hard to tell. But at the same time, you don't really notice that it's supposed to give you that direction. It's a nice subtle design to subliminally give the player that information. Another example is how throughout the game in general, there will be times where projectiles are coming towards you from the front of the screen, and to tell you what's coming up, they have these little cardboard cutouts that pop up first, warning you to be aware that something's about to smack you. In World 2, some tiles, for instance, have a stain, I guess, indicating that there's a projectile continuously hitting it. And yeah, I know some of this stuff is game design 101, but maybe it's 102. My point is there's a lot of thought put into this sort of thing, and I think elements of this game you could use to teach a game design class or something. While they're not the most overwhelmingly well-designed levels and a bit repetitive, I found this game kind of fascinating in these sort of fashions. Keep in mind, I don't know anything about game design, so maybe don't teach us in a game design class, but if you base your teaching off of some random guy's YouTube videos, it's your fault, don't sue me. Going over some of the other levels here, we have the Runes world. For some reason, this world only has 2 levels instead of 3 before the respective boss, and there's apparently some code scrapped for another one in the game's files that didn't make the cut. Regardless, these levels are pretty long, so I didn't notice it too much. Crisis Cavern has these dark portions, which I think serves as a good follow-up challenge to the first world, since it's basically the same, but there's an extra variable of your surroundings slowly introduced. These levels also introduce the idea of being, what's this word? I had to look it up in a dictionary. Patient? I know, it's a crazy concept. Who wants to do that? I wanna go fast. If you step on these net-like objects too early, crap will fall from the sky. Or in the worst case of scenarios, these little spiky swings will activate, moving back and forth. Now let me tell you, while not impossible, these things are a real nuisance to avoid. I like this risk-reward that the game presents you with here, as you technically don't have to deal with that obstacle as long as you're careful. And let's say you do trigger it. It's hard, but you can still dodge it. All playstyles are balanced very well in instances like this. The space world is probably one of my favorites in the entire game. There's some annoying elements, sure, like these enemies that spin around like a college kid who partied too hard. Also, there's some platforms that don't even look like you can jump on them. Come on, who's gonna trust their life with this thing? It doesn't even look like a platform. But overall, I do like the space level. This builds upon the prior world's introduction to being patient, because now you gotta do it with these lasers that can turn on and off. Or you can just run through them if you really don't care about your health. The only other notable thing about this world is the music. Far Out's music is nothing short of pure brilliance. In general, I do like the music in this game, but it does sound pretty outdated and crunchy. There's a motif approach with a similar cadence to the original Pac Man game. I don't think the music is mind-blowing or anything, besides Far Out, but it has its charm, and it's still a genuinely enjoyable soundtrack. I always found myself humming along and enjoying every second of it. That being said, I still did find it pretty hard to listen to some of this in 2022. It's just so compressed. If you've heard Pac Man World 2 music throughout this video, it's literally because half of the soundtrack of World 1 just doesn't sound that good against a voiceover, so I needed a little something extra. Back to the space world, I guess here I can talk about what these little bounce pad buttons do, which are in the game from the start, but it feels like the space level has so many of them, so that's just where I'm gonna put it in the video, and not because I forgot to write this in the tutorial. I would never. Don't even accuse me of that. Honestly, a lot of them feel similar, but here's the gist. Green switches are used to perform a one-time action. Yellow buttons have an action that can be reset if needed, such as bringing a platform back to you, and blue switches usually work in sequence with each other. Sometimes they're up to 3. I never really pay attention to their function. They all kind of felt the same. I just slam. I already talked about the clown level, so we're jumping to the factory level, which feels a little stale to me. I think factory levels in games are kind of just boring in general, and this one doesn't do that much to change that. That being said, this level has one of my favorite moments of the entire game, specifically 5-3. We gotta describe a game mechanic here to give full context, so sit down and listen to old Jeff here. So, you remember that intro cutscene where everyone got taken? I know, it's been like 20 minutes since then. I don't blame you if you forgot, but yeah, you gotta save it. Throughout the levels in Pac Man World, there are keys as a collectible. Bring it to the gate, and the friends are free. These ghosts imprison a damn baby. How heartless are they? I mean, I guess they're ghosts. They don't have hearts. Anyways, these are required in order to get to the final level of the game. These aren't optional. One thing that kind of sucks though is that the key and cage aren't always in the same level. I think this would be fine if they gave you more indications of that on the menus or something of the sort, but you get nothing. For me, there would always be that element of stress where it's like, oh god, am I missing something? Which, you know what, fair enough. I don't mind there being some incentive to always be exploring. Otherwise, I do think a player could just run to the end of the level too often. I just wish it was conveyed a little better to us. Anyways, the main reason I bring this up is that the key in the level down the tubes to save Pac Jr. is a highlight of the game for me. Here, you have 2 options at a first glance. You can run straight to the goal, which is quite easy to access and makes the level really short, which I did at first, but then I was sitting there and thinking like, no, there's no way. There was like some water portions. There's gotta be more to the level. It's almost like a fake out, and if you do a little exploring, there's a whole water maze that, while might be boring to some people, I don't know, I really enjoyed it. I think the maze added a sense of confusion and chaotic energy that the rest of the game kind of was missing at some points. And I think the reason I like this is that while I do think the general level design in Pac Man World is good, it's a little samey. Each world kind of has the same design philosophy, same general mechanics. There are things to switch it up, literally. There are switches that switch things up. don't all apply to once, okay? It was funny. But yeah, I wouldn't consider it outlandish if someone came to me and said, Pac Man World is kind of a repetitive game. I would respond with, yeah, you're right, it kind of is. But also, sir, this is a Wendy's. Why are you talking about Pac Man World? My manager just called the police, okay? Get out. The good news is, even though some of the levels are a bit samey, this game isn't super long. I think it finishes before it gets to a point where the platforming or fruit collecting gets genuinely boring. It's a short game, but I think it works in its favor rather than being a serious flaw, especially because some levels are genuinely hard too, but not hard enough where you'll have to quit your day job for it. And even if the levels are a bit similar functionality-wise, they look so unique that you almost don't even realize it. In fact, I may not have even thought of it until I sat down and analyzed my gameplay. For one, I love that this game abandons the whole what I consider Mario theming, one of my least favorite gaming tropes. How often do you see ghosts, pirates, clowns in the same game? This is really special. And graphically, I really do love how this game looks, even for a PS1 game. Pac-Man is really detailed and funny too. They gave him some idle animations like eating Pac Dots, taking notes from the classic Sonic sprite work seen in the Genesis games. Even the ghosts are given some character here. Every world has them in different costumes. I specifically love the Funhouse ones. I don't know why, but it's really funny to see the ghosts in clown attire. That's the little things that sell it. Like the leaves and rain that continues on pause screens and end screens. Now that is just, oh, that's so cozy. I didn't even grow up with this game and I'm nostalgic for it. The final world is the spooky level, appropriate before we invade a ghost's castle. And you know, I should have waited a month for October, but as a trade-off, I guess the Pac Man World Re-Pac hype would already be gone. Okay, I already know I'm late with this video. I tried. I don't want to shit something out. The new game smell is gone. I'm aware. Anyways, I do love these levels quite a bit. I should note that this level has a lot of points where you're running straight towards the camera, which is a bit disorienting. There are also just a lot of BS points in the level, like disappearing platforms that also have thunder, kind of reminding me of Anubis Rex in terms of ability to dodge, but at least this is 6-3 and, you know, not the second boss of the game. Well, before we can face off with Pac Man, as said earlier, we need to rescue all of our friends. In my playthrough, I missed one. Well, one thing that sucks is that the game doesn't tell you which friends you have and haven't saved on any main maps. Technically, the friends you save are in the hub world, but then they'd only say one text box and leave when you talk to them, so at the end, there is no lasting indication. I wish they just stayed. It doesn't help that most of your friends are just Pac Man relatives. They all blended in my brain. Kind of a minor complaint, I guess, but it took me like an hour to find which one I missed, so I was kind of mad.
Wow.
The final Pac Man fight is an accumulation of all the skills you learn throughout the game. The first phase is about throwing dots at Pac Man, one of the few times this mechanic is even used, to be fair. The second phase is about the butt bounce, and you have to avoid his butt bounces, and the third focuses on the rev roll. The third phase is the only part of the fight I think is unfair, and sometimes he can just send you flying into that damn abyss, but besides that, I think it's a really good fight. Nowhere near the bullshit levels of some of the other bosses, and mostly fair.
One interesting mechanic at play here is that the friends you save throughout the game will actually give you health during this fight, which I think is really interesting, but because it's forced, it doesn't have any real stakes to them. Instead, what I would have liked to see is that the friends are optional, but they do give you health if you do save them still, meaning it's up to you. Do you want to go into Pac Man with 1 health refill, 0, 5? It would have been a lot more of a risk reward for the player, and I think that would have been the way to go about it, because as is, while it's nice, it doesn't really have any stakes to it.
The fight concludes and we see poor little Orson surfacing from Pac Man, crying to Pac Man that he mainly just wanted to be loved and have friends, to which you might think Pac Man is like, hey man, it's okay. It's okay, man. You know, everyone has their problem. Nope, he takes out a fucking pack pellet and kills him in front of all of his goddamn friends.
Why? Why did they do that? Why did they make Pac Man a cold-blooded killer? Like, Orson's crying. He's like, hey, I need a friend, I'm sorry. But Pac Man, no, you don't with Pac Man. He takes out a power pellet and just eats him right in front of all of his friends too. Like, there's a whole party for him, and he's like, Pac Man's like, no, I'm just gonna eat you in front of everyone, in front of his own wife and kids. Pac Man just ate the ghost in front of his own wife and kids. Oh my god, Pac Man was made out to be a cold-blooded killer in this game. He has more edge than Sonic, but for all the wrong reasons. Why did they do this?
Imagine at the end of Super Mario Bros. If Mario just threw Peach into the lava.
It's me, Mario. This is your fault for getting kidnapped. Yahoo!
Imagine if in Pokemon, instead of a fair final fight, you just send your Charizard to obliterate the other captain. Imagine if in Zelda, you sold your Triforce to Ganondorf for drug money. Okay, you get the idea, but you know what? Do you get the idea? The idea that Namco turned Pac Man, a lovable character for kids, into a complete and utter douchebag. Not even a douchebag, a literal murderer, a criminal. I love it. It's actually it's actually really funny. I like the scene a lot. And that's Pac Man World. You can play all the mazes if you unlock them back to back in the game's marathon mode, and also play the OG Pac Man, a nice little bonus of course. And that's about it. It's a short game, but one that I feel doesn't overstay its welcome. I think it's a perfect length, and this might shock you all, but it's my favorite of the original trilogy. If you were worried that with this one I was coming for your childhood like I was for World 2, okay, we're good. This game passed the test. But yeah, I just think in general, the fact that the collectibles are more rooted in gameplay and puzzle solving rather than being outright collectibles is a huge benefit, and I think Pac Man works quite a bit more in smaller, more condensed environments rather than giant worlds. The platforming, besides the depth perception issues, it genuinely feels like if you die, it's your fault most of the time, and that's not to say the depth perception issues aren't a big problem. They still do hurt the experience to an extent, but I think the game is fun enough where it's worth playing, or get repacked. But I was pretending it didn't exist for the sake of this early game review, so that's why I didn't mention it.
And with that, it's time for the remake that you and your mother clicked on this video for. That's right, it's time for Pac Man World on Game Boy Advanced. Okay, look, I know you're probably here for Re-Pac. You might not be interested in it, but I'm going to put a time code up just in case. I do encourage you to stick around. It's interesting, it's unique, it won't take that long. But here's Pac Man World on Game Boy Advance. Let's check it out.
Pac Man World on Game Boy Advance was released in 2004. Yup, 5 years after the original Pac Man World, and at a time when the DS was almost out. Well, thankfully, they took out the 20th anniversary part in the title, which, as much as I complained about it prior, it's also just really weird to see it gone. It's cursed. It feels empty. Something should be there. I usually like to give some context regarding development here, but like with a lot of GBA ports, there's really not a lot out there. I mean, it was developed by Full Fat Games, who had a history of making these types of demakes prior, even continuing to the DS era. They were also responsible for Pac Man World 2 on GBA, and the menus are reused in that game. But yeah, I don't know, why does this version exist? I think because we failed as a society.
If I don't cover this, who's going to? You know, like, no one's gonna do a deep dive on this game, so if someone had to do it, it had to be me. I hate my life.
Alright, here's what they cut. No more cutscenes. You get your grainy stills. You know what? Fair enough, the GBA is about as powerful as a pencil sharpener. About half the levels are gone now, with the entire factory world just outright missing, and the bosses are gone entirely except for Talkman. The music here is obviously a lot worse as well, but I don't know, the sky's blue. What do you want me to say? It's a given. There's also no more mazes, which that is weird, because you can still collect Galaxians, but they're treated like straight up fruit and just open a normal door. Well, I guess these ones are like red Galaxians. Maybe they just don't have any special zest to them. Like, I don't know, are red Galaxians known to be better in the Galaga games? It's a little disappointing. I think the GBA could have definitely handled some custom Pac-Man mazes, so that decision I'm not super happy about personally. And also, there's no original Pac-Man at all. Like, come on, you think that'd be a freebie for the game developers? It's a game as old as time. Even the GBA could handle that. In fact, Pac-Man's on the GBA. But if you look past all these things and just focus on what's here, I still think it's a decent product. I mean, look at this game. It's somewhat faithfully recreated. It's still 3D-esque. They didn't take any shortcuts here, and while it's obviously downgraded, it still looks really nice, and these levels are mostly the respective levels from the PlayStation game. Some mechanics are a little different though. They couldn't really do the rev roll thing from the Funhouse world, so you just get to rev roll 4 ramps in a row instead. Why they didn't just cut this from the game is beyond me. I don't know, it's boring and repetitive, kinda hurting the level design a bit here, not really following the developer's original intentions. Some rev roll ramps are now unfortunately a bit jank. Especially in the last world, I would find myself flying over if I wasn't careful, which isn't really fair if you don't know what's up ahead. So I often just butt bounced up hills to compensate. I think presentation-wise, this game is a little rough around the edges. When Pac-Man jumps, he doesn't even bend his knees. Look at this guy. I mean, maybe Pac-Man's toes are just that strong, because all you can see is a slight little bend in his foot. These menus are really poorly designed as well. I don't know if this was just me, but when I saw these 3 Pac pellets sitting on the menu for each world, I thought each one was correlated with a level. Well, no, not all worlds even have 3 levels, so it's just odd to me. I never got used to that in my entire playthrough. Like, why are those there? The keys are still here to rescue your friend. I didn't know if this was required at first, but in my playthrough, I really didn't want to risk it, so I made sure to get every last friend. I didn't want to have to be replaying this game, God forbid. While doing research later, I did find out that you actually don't have to rescue the friends. It's more or less for exploring, so actually that's a really positive change that the Game Boy Advance version takes. Alright, that's 1 for Pac Man World on GBA. Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna be able to catch up here. The Pac-Man letters are also here, except this time they don't take you to a bonus level, which, like, I don't know, that's another thing that I feel was unnecessarily cut from the game. On the subject of collectibles, I don't even know where to put this, but we gotta talk about something, so just sit down. On 1-2, I got all the letters and spelled out Pac-An. I couldn't find an M. I looked it up, I watched like 3 Let's Plays, and no one found it either. So I figured one of the 2 things was occurring here. The first is they forgot to code it in the game, which I thought was really unlikely. The second was what I thought occurred, being they hid it in a really cryptic place. Now tell me, who in the hell is gonna bounce in this tiny corner on a platform that's completely out of view? They had way too much faith in the player, especially considering this is the second level of the game. Like, I'm not trying to put anyone down, but no one's gonna solve that. We're not smart enough as human beings.
I genuinely wonder how many kids even found that M. Because the Let's Plays I watched, no one found it. So what were they going for here? Like, if this was a PlayStation trophy, it would be one of those that has like 0.02%. That is the most out of the way, most cryptic M I've ever seen. What does that M even stand for? Mean?
You want to know another thing I hate about this game? The ghosts don't have that satisfying chomp once you eat one. No pause, no altered music, and not even an animation on Pac Man. You just go through them like they're a ghost. Well, you got me there. I hate little things that are missing like this because it makes me feel the developers didn't really understand the source material, you know what I mean? The biggest issue I have with this game is that it just feels kind of weird to play. I found myself kind of nauseous, something I can't really describe, but it just hurt my head to play this at a certain certain point. The depth perception problems are in full blast here. If you thought they were bad in the PS1 version, well, you were right, but they're worse here. These clouds in the final world are so disorienting. I died so many times on these things. I do it to give the developers credit to an extent. They did add these arrows to indicate exactly where platforms line up. That's of course a much needed addition, but sometimes I don't even trust them. Like this arrow in 2-2. Come on, that block looks like it's in the foreground. I'm not gonna trust that. Everything feels like a leap of faith in this game, and I don't have faith in the developers, so this game is like half the responsibility for my outstanding trust issues. And what's up with this lava over here? You can see the exact vertical lines when they cut it off. I don't expect perfection from Game Boy Advance graphics, but this is just lazy. And when you save your friends, they don't even have proper grammar. There's no commas. Pac-Man, you are the best.
Maybe that's on purpose. Maybe it's like, it's a dog. Dogs don't use commas. Dogs also can't talk.
I don't know, the more I play this game, the more flaws I find in it. It might have been better to only play a few levels. I feel like I'm nitpicking almost, but some of these flaws are a huge deal to me. I hate these platforms that go up and down. The window is a lot shorter than in the original. It's like 3 frames, and if it's curved, forget it. You're rolling down. It's over for you. The game uses the same life system as the original, which kinda sucks, because now there's no bonus worlds or slot machines to bolster your life count. So what you get is a system that's not super optimized for the game the way they originally designed it. And on top of that, it's artificially harder. The Talkman fight though is fine. It's super easy. Your friends give you health again, this time being a reward for finding them instead of a forced requirement, and it's the same 3 phases in the original. And I don't know, I'm kind of mixed on this game. You could do a lot worse. You know what, if you were a kid growing up in this era, a game like this was a godsend. Sometimes you would buy a game originally released for consoles, and it would be a totally different game. This is at its core Pac Man World, just a sloppy rendition, but in this day and age, there's really no reason to ever touch it.
Alright, enough messing around. Now it's time for Pac Man World on the Tiger Electron. No, I'm just kidding, that doesn't actually exist. It's time for Pac Man World Re-Pac!
Pac Man World Re-Pac would be released August 26th, 2022, after being announced in a Nintendo Direct I mentioned earlier about 2 months prior. Development began about 2 years before this, and you can even see some character models that would be reused in Re-Pac in the game Pac-Man Museum Plus, as much as that exact squad of characters that would be later in the game. Like, come on, we knew this was coming. If Namco was a schoolyard friend, I wouldn't tell them my secrets. So to me at least, I always felt like this remake was a shoo-in. I mean, honestly, part of me really thought Pac Man World should have been in Museum Plus in the first place. Maybe that's a bit greedy of me to expect for the scope of the project, but I would have liked a beefier single-player experience in the collection than, you know, Pac-Land. And wouldn't you know it, a few months after it released, we'd be playing a remake of World, a much better trade. And that's because the price is really good. Re-Pac sells for $30, which since this game is short, I think that's a really fair price for a modern game. I quite respect it. I think even $40 would have been pushing it. It's nice to see a company have some humility. Nintendo, for instance, re-released Link's Awakening, a 10-hour game for $60, which, like, wow. I mean, the graphics are so much nicer, but at its core, it's a Game Boy game. It just feels a bit greedy. Re-Pac came from Bandai Namco, realizing that Pac Man World franchise was still something requested and truly wanted by fans of the series. Gee, you think, Namco? You finally realized that some bastardized version of a Pac-Man TV show is not what we wanted to replace World? It only took you 8 years to learn that lesson. You think we wanted Ghostly Adventures? But no, better late than never. At least the Pac is now back. Kinda like the Super Monkey Ball Twitter, Pac-Man would also form a Twitter himself to promote the game. Here they would do little giveaways like this one. 20 lucky people would win a free copy of the game and a chrome Pac-Man statue.
You're looking at one of the winners. I was so excited. And you know, I didn't know where to put this in the video, so I'm just gonna add it in this section, but oh my god. Unfortunately, it probably won't ship in time for this video. This is a new game, so I've been trying to get this video out just ASAP. I don't want to wait around for that to be here, but I will probably post it as like a small video or like a community tab post or Twitter or something, so be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already.
Booting up the game, it's quite obvious that the cutscenes have received basically a complete overhaul. One change I'm not happy about is that there's no more voice acting. Instead, the ghosts kind of speak in a Simish type of language, or Animal Crossing, or like a drunk person chewing soap. I would have rather just seen it redone. It's not the same charm like this.
In general, the cutscenes did have to be reworked due to the whole Miss Pac-Man scandal.
For those who don't know, and I'm sure most of you know by now, Namco is not allowed to use Pac-Man in their games. To keep it simple, Act Games, the people who made those crappy clone consoles, got a hold of the rights to Miss Pac-Man, and due to some legal jargon regarding their misuse of the franchise rights or something, Namco would have to pay heavy royalties to keep Miss Pac-Man in their products. If you want to know more about this, I'd say go watch Johnny's YouTube video. He did a really good job and goes a lot more in detail than the scope of what I can do in this video. Yep, I am sure a channel my size does really good for promoting a video this big. You're welcome, Johnny, for your 12 additional views, okay? Don't thank me. What we get in Miss Pac-Man's place is Pac-Mom, and, like, honestly, I don't really care that much. I don't think it's a huge deal. I mean, Pac-Mom is a stupid name. You can just call her Pac-Woman. It's right in front of you. Because now people are gonna ask if Pac-Mom is Pac-Man's mom. And she's his wife, so like it's kind of awkward, I'm not gonna lie. Pac-Boy replaces Pac-Man Jr. and Baby Pac-Man replaces Pac-Sis. And to be honest, I think as long as you're not a diehard fan, this really isn't a problem with the game. And besides the World Series, me personally, I'm a fairly casual Pac-Man fan. Like, to be honest, I didn't even realize the Kid Packs were different. I just thought they got kind of redesigned. Chomp Chomp got a slight redesign now and is now named Pac-Buddy. I don't know if there's a legal reason for that, but I am noting it nonetheless. Namco thought they could just sneak that past me, and I don't appreciate that. You don't mess with my precious Chomp Chomp. He's too good of a boy. So the cutscenes are fine. I think it removes a bit of the charm, not just the voice acting being gone, of course, but the whole HD polish. While looking good, it's nowhere near as interesting or as exciting as CGI cutscenes back in the day, and not the developers' fault, really. I think they did what they could for the most part. Gameplay-wise, I would say Re-Pac is an improvement in almost every way. You have all the moves from before, but now you get like a Yoshi flutter. It doesn't give you the most distance, but just enough to be useful. I gotta be honest though, after playing the PlayStation version right before this, I kinda just forgot this move existed for my entire playthrough. It was just never in my mind. And oddly enough, I had the same experience with the D-pad. The game does obviously support better analog movement, but I just kinda got used to the D-pad and I still kinda prefer it for this game. I think mostly that's because the levels are the same and just feel designed for it. And y'all conditioned me too much to like simplicity. But hey, you have that option now at least. Another control change is that the swimming controls have been overhauled. Previously to swim, you had to hold the triangle button to go down and the X button to go up, which was kind of disorienting. In Re-Pac, you sink naturally, and now it's kind of like Mario swimming or Flappy Bird. Maybe not Flappy Bird, but I think that comparison's funnier, so I'm using it. Oh, one new mechanic they added is now eating a power pellet turns you big. What is this, made out of spinach? I don't think it really adds anything to the game. It's basically just a visual effect, but it's something. I appreciate them adding it and trying to make the game fresh. To compensate for the areas with the gaps, the developers fill them in with temporary platforms, truly making you invincible. And I think sometimes there are like crates and stuff you can break now too. It doesn't add that much to the game, but it's cool and I do like it. It's little changes like this that I appreciate. Another one of the same scope is that they added enemies made out of steel, giving you more of a reason to get the chrome pellet, and turns it into something a little more unique, making it less of a stolen concept from Mario 64. It's again something that doesn't add too much, but I think should at least be appreciated. They did try to make this game interesting in a few ways. One thing I would have really liked to see them add would have been some camera support. I'm not saying a full camera is obviously you can't have it being facing the player because you just see an empty void, but it could have been like Super Mario 3D World. In that game, you usually have 2 or 3 camera angles you could slightly adjust at any point. The only reason I bring this up is because I do unfortunately think the depth perception is still somewhat of an issue I ran into with this game. It's not as bad as the other versions, but it still does exist. Pac-Man's shadow doesn't always line up with the platforms. I did find myself dying to this still quite a bit. And those damn sharks are still unavoidable. I dare you to try to sneak past them. I'm right at the invisible wall. What else does this game want? Roses and a sunset picnic with some wine? Well, no, you're not getting anything from me. I'll just take the hit, whatever.
I don't really know how Namco could have avoided that. Like, it kind of just comes with the territory of remaking this type of game, as the geometry is pretty much reused. But it still is a little bit unfortunate. What I would say though is it definitely doesn't ruin the game or anything. It just feels a little antiquated when it does happen and pretty frustrating.
Alright, we gotta talk about the graphics. Who in the name of Pac Man said that this game of all games was allowed to look this good? Bandai Namco, okay? Those guys, they were flexing with this game, alright? It almost reminds me of Luigi's Mansion 3, a cartoony kids type of game with stupid amounts of detail. There are some textures that are still a little gross, like this radioactive waste does kind of still look like a PlayStation texture, but there's so much that looks outstanding that I can forgive the small moments like that. The whole game maintains vibrant graphics throughout, and Pac Man honestly has just never never looked better. Well done to the team who made this, because it is way too good for a goddamn Pac-Man game. Besides a few points, the game runs at a smooth 1080p 60 FPS on the last gen consoles and even 4K on the modern consoles. Is that the standard nowadays? I don't really keep up with modern games, I'm not gonna lie. Then you get to the Switch. Alright, it looks fine, but runs a little poorly. One thing to note is that there's a performance mode that lowers the resolution from 1080 to give it a smoother frame rate. I don't own the Switch version at this moment, but from everyone I've talked to, the performance surprisingly works really well with this mode, and every review I've seen of the Switch version highly recommends it, so I will too. I'll bandwagon. Usually I talk about the graphics and music together, and I'm gonna be predictable and follow suit. Unfortunately though, the team didn't redo all the songs in this game. In fact, I don't think they really redid any of them. There's a few new songs, like a song with lyrics that plays during the credits, and some boss fights have different phases, so there's some new songs there, but yeah, like 90% of the songs in this game are the same. I have a little bit of a music ear. I can tell there's some like slight mixing differences and compression differences. I don't really know though why they didn't just redo it. It's kind of disappointing, especially considering this remake did the graphics side of things so well. In Banana Mania, half the songs in that were completely new and the other half were redone, but at least they tried to make new music. One of my favorite things about the game. I feel like in a remake, you should just have an all new soundtrack, and you can always put the old songs as an option for those who want it. Or, you know, charge DLC for it if you're scummy like that. So yeah, it's a bit of a letdown to me, but on the plus side, the original soundtrack is still good, so it's not like they absolutely needed to change it for the game to be fun, but the crunchiness is still present. This does kind of create a paradox where you're playing a game with 2022 graphics that sounds like it was from the 90s. The sound effects were mostly reworked though, at least. No more elephant noises when you rev-roll. I miss the elephant. As said, the levels are basically the same. The bosses though, well, that's a completely different story, as some of them are almost entirely redone. We'll go one by one here. The windbag fight is mostly the same, but instead of just having 5 buttons to fling at him, you start with 3 and then ramp up to 5. Other than that, there's nothing too different here.
One of my biggest questions going into this remake would be, are they going to change the Anubis Rex fight? Are they going to change King Galaxian? Because that changes this game from like a 7 out of 10 to a literal 8 if they did.
And I was so happy to find out they did. Anubis Rex is actually really fun now. I love this version of this boss. It's not stupidly easy, there's still a lot that can come flying at you, and there are moments that will have you ripping out your hair, but regardless, it's a rewarding boss when you finally accomplish it. For one, there's really no jumping between rev-roll platforms anymore, as it's a straight up floor, but also this floor will crumble, giving a much smoother progression of difficulty. One thing to note though is that while the original will give you a checkpoint at each phase, this game opts to make you start from the very beginning if you die. Since this boss is no longer criminally unfair, I think that's a fair trade-off. And yeah, what went from one of my least favorite parts in Pac Man World turns into one of my favorite parts here. Well done, Namco.
Alright, it was time for King Galaxian. My heart was pounding as I entered the stage. I was like, am I gonna have to sacrifice one of my hands again? And to my surprise, they changed it. You can just hold down the button now. Oh, thank you.
Yup, King Galaxian lets you fire straight up now. Throw your turbo controllers in the trash, they're useless. It's a lot easier, I won't lie, almost too easy, but I would rather it be too easy than frying off my hand again. I only have one left after World 1, so I need to preserve it for as long as I can. Besides that, it's pretty much the same fight. There is a lot more health thrown at you too. I think if they wanted to make this hard, maybe just let players do the turbo, but give almost no health. I almost feel like they went a bit too soft on us here. Clown Pre is no longer an over-the-head eraser. Instead, being first person. It does lag a little bit on the PS4 version, the one I played, but I still think it's really fun and a highlight of the game. I'm not gonna lie, it kind of made me want more levels of these. I think this could have been expanded a bit. It's stupid fun, sure, nowhere near something like Mario Kart, but it's enjoyable and gave me a smile. This level's pretty easy, but besides that horrible turn in the original, so was the originals. I don't think every level needs to be hard anyways. Sometimes it's good to just sit back and have a, what's it called? I'm trying to think of the word. Oh yeah, fun. Chrome Keeper is basically entirely redone. Instead of the horseshoe-shaped room now, there's a bunch of conveyor belts. You have to get the chrome pellet and rev-roll into him, avoiding the magnetizing devices overhead, which I often kept forgetting to dodge. This whole fight is pretty slow, to be honest. I don't think it's better or worse than the original. I do appreciate them going out of their way to literally recreate a boss. In a way, it's kind of like just playing a new level entirely, which for a remake, I do quite appreciate.
And I do have to say, the bosses, which were a huge low point for me in World 1, are one of my favorite parts about this entire game now.
I don't mean to keep talking about Banana Mania, it's just like the closest point of comparison, but I have to say, while I obviously love that game, Re-Pac kind of kicks its ass a bit. Like, this is how you do a remake. It's not perfect, sure, no game is, but there's a lot of care and passion put into this product, and I really felt that from the second the game booted up to the very end. You could tell the developers really did care about the product they were making. One concept I'm kind of mixed on though is the new life system. It's basically the same, as in you can game over and have to start a level over, but now there are a ton more lives. Look at this, I had like 70 at the end of my playthrough, and I didn't even do the roulettes here because at a certain point I had so many damn lives I was like, well, I don't need to waste my time here anymore. In that sense, the pressure when it comes to the lives are almost entirely gone. I don't think it ruins the game, it just makes it a bit easier, and I could have just been biased playing the original before this. I do think someone who hasn't would struggle a bit more. I played the game in a voice chat with JeffCompass, who did not play the original, and towards the end of the game, he only had like 10 lives or something, and he was fully collecting. It could have just been me being a little more experienced. Yeah, I'm just a pro at Pac Man World, what can I say? Okay, one last time I mentioned Banana Mania. At least Pac Man World Re-Pac has a life system. Okay, I'm done. The cops are coming to my house to take me away. I can't talk to my wife and kids anymore. But while now the roulette system and mechanics like the bonus levels became a bit more useless to me, one benefit to having such a big amount of lives was that I could actually play the mazes again without much stress about what effects it could have on me. And actually, the lives are no longer even shared between the two, period. You have 3 fresh lives upon starting a maze that does not impact the rest of the game. This is one of the best changes in the entire game in my opinion. It makes it feel like a genuine break and breath of fresh air in the gameplay and provides a lot more of an adequate variety. One idea they implemented to counter the easier difficulty is that you can no longer take a hit by a ghost. There's no health bar. Instead, one touch and you're dead, which is in line like the classic arcade games. What isn't like the classics though is now the power pellet makes you big. Levels do accommodate this, and it's funny to see the terrain get stretched out. Although keep in mind, this basically does nothing. It's a visual. Also, if you hug a wall normally, you get a slight rumble and see sparks. I found this fun to do on purpose. It's funny. The hub world has also pretty much been entirely recreated here. Unfortunately, there's still nothing to do and not much to see, which is kind of sad. I felt like the emptiness was very prevalent in a modern game. To exemplify the fact that you can do worlds out of order now, at least, there are branching paths instead of a straight up left to right, which was seen in the original, which I think is a hint to the player that they do have the freedom to explore. Someone in the original might not have even realized that you can skip levels. They also added teleporters, which helps you move between worlds, which is a nice addition. What's super nice about these is you can literally mash the button once you enter one, and it will automatically be on the next world. They were really looking out for the players here in a lot of ways. That is such a nice quality of life feature. Alright, but I know half of you came to this video to hear the juicy details, the flaws. Let's get rid of the butterflies and flowers and happiness, and let's turn hardcore. Well, here's a flaw. In the original Pac Man World, all you have to do to see how many fruits you have at a given point is press a trigger button down. It moves up slowly, no problems. But despite this game not using trigger buttons, you can't do that here. You have to pause the game, which is very quick, but I don't know why they changed it when it was literally perfect before. The fruits still come up when you're by a door, so whatever, I guess. And one positive about the items, like keys and letters at least, is now before you enter a level, you're told exactly what it has in it. So no more crying if you forgot where one of your friends were, like in the original. Another thing that I think sucks, and a lot of games do this nowadays, this isn't exclusive to Pac Man World, is that this game always flashes easy mode in your face if you die too many times. I'm not really against games having an easy mode, but I really don't like when games ask you if you want to switch to it. Like, let it be an option, put it in the menus, but don't have it be a recommendations. I don't want this in my damn face. I wish you could at least turn off the prompt, but you can't. And yeah, besides those small things and the music, I think that's all I got. So let's go face off against Pac Man one last time. Third time's a charm, so maybe he'll win. Nah, just kidding, he sucks. Here no longer are you required to save all your friends. No, in fact, you can let them all perish if you want to. But the trade-off is you won't have any health in the final boss. Huh, this sounds familiar. It's almost like I suggested this in my original games review. That's crazy. I was trying to do some cute foreshadowing in my review. I don't know if it paid off. But regardless, it's a great change and a really good way to encourage explorations without it being forced. You can fight Pac Man with nothing if you're good enough at the game.
I certainly wasn't.
It's still a hard boss, but the plus side is there's no longer any move that sends you flying off the stage. It's a classic type of boss in these games where you learn the patterns and sit there playing over and over until you can do it. It is quite rewarding, and you're sitting there playing in the dead of night with sweat dripping down your face. The first phase lets you do whatever attack you want, so you're no longer required to throw pack dots. You can rev roll too. The second is a barrage of cannonballs that come down on you with an iron pellet as well. I wonder if I should grab that. That might be important. Then and only then can you jump on him. This phase is kind of like the Chrome Keeper fight, not just because of the Chrome Pellet, more so because there's a lot of waiting. The third phase, Talk Man, turns him super big. You have to destroy his boots and then climb up his hands to jump on him. Be careful though, because this hand can actually come down and kill you. Who's gonna dodge that? If you do rescue all your friends, not only will you have a constant influx of health, but you get a new happy ending. Now Pac-Man doesn't kill Orson in cold blood, he invites him to the party back on Pac Island and everyone's happy. Don't worry, the bad ending still has you murder Orson because fuck that guy, right? There's a game in the credits, and one thing that I think kind of sucks here that I'll mention just while we're here, apparently Namco didn't shout out anyone who worked on the original game, which is kind of lame. It was quite a long credit sequence, so I thought at first they had to have, but apparently they didn't. I don't think it's a good look for Namco to do that, but I don't want to get into that all right now. It's not the point of this review, but it's a little disappointing regardless if true.
Pac Man World Re-Pac is just so good. It's a great game. My biggest problem I have with it, I wish there was more to play.
I think that's not a bad problem to have necessarily, but seriously, I do wish it lasted a bit longer. I felt like the original game was a good length, but it was also harder and had worse mechanics. Now that the gameplay is entirely refined, I wanted more worlds this time around, or some more side modes, or anything. No. There's still the maze mode and OG Pac-Man, but nothing truly new. I doubt they'll do it, but they could always add DLC to the game, but yeah, I don't think that'll happen. They can also make a new Pac Man World game, but I think they might actually just make Pac Man World Re-Pac 2 or Pac Man World 2 Re-Pac. I don't know. I made a poll, and I probably agree with that one. I think Pac Man World Re-Pac should be used in a game design class to show how a remake should be. The only major downside is just the lack of new music. Maybe skip that chapter in that textbook. But besides that, it's a remake that's not only faithful, but does enough new where it's not entirely stale, like the redone bosses and moments like the Chrome enemies. They also changed a lot of the fatal flaws from the original game. Overall, this is a product that's really welcoming for both beginners and veterans of this franchise. It's a job well done, and even if it has a few flaws still, it's genuinely one of my favorite games that released this year. And honestly, I may go so far as to say it's been my favorite remake in at least a good few years.
And yeah, there's 3 versions of Pac Man World, and thus concluding my Pac Man World trilogy retrospective of sorts. Wait, there's a racing game spin-off. Well, project's not over. I actually forgot about that. The last question we need to answer before I sign off is, what's the best version of Pac Man World? And it's a simple question, really. I think the Pac Man World on GBA is the best version. Nah, I'm just kidding. I had you fooled, though. I had you fooled. Don't pretend I didn't. I got you there. Anyways, go buy Pac Man World Re-Pac. It's a great game.